Hi, my name is Muhammad Omar and this video is part of Microsoft Visual Studio 2012 Application Lifecycle Management Hands-on Labs. This video is brought to you by MIA LM Community. In this lab, you will learn how Visual Studio Team Foundation Server 2012 can help you quickly plan, manage, and track work across your entire team. You will explore the new product backlog, sprint backlog, and task board, which can be used to track the flow of work during the course of an iteration. In order to complete this lab, you will need the Visual Studio 2012 virtual machine provided by Microsoft. If you don't have this virtual machine by now, please use this link to download it. This hands-on lab includes the following exercises: product backlog and sprints, task board. Exercise 1. Product backlog and sprints. In this exercise, you will learn how to use Team Foundation Server 2012 to manage your product backlog, create work items, break work items into tasks, and assign tasks to team members. The new backlog features enable you to easily do all of this work while keeping an eye on the team capacity. Please note that the team project used in this lab uses a Scrum process template, but the core features demonstrated apply to all the process templates. Let's begin by logging to the virtual machine. We're gonna use the username Julia and the password capital B number 2 SSW0RD. Now let's launch the Internet Explorer from the taskbar. Now select the TFS Web Access button from the favorite bar at the top. The home view for the Fabric and Fiber web team provides a high-level overview of the current iteration, Sprint 3, including team workload versus capacity, and burn down of tasks over time, and team favorites, which can include a configurable assortment of work items queries, build definitions, and version control paths. In addition, there are links to quickly create new work items and bugs, load the backlog, task board, initiate requests for feedback, and so on. Note that the team favorites can be added or removed from within the Team Web Access portal. For example, let's navigate to the Build tab to assign a build definitions as a team favorite. Let's click on Build. Now we can choose a build definition to right-click on and choose as a team favorite. In addition, team favorite work items queries can be modified from within Visual Studio. As you can see, under the member section, there are several members listed in this team. Teams are a new concept introduced in Team Foundation Server 2012 to make it easier to manage, assign, and track work. This team is responsible for handling all of the engineering work associated with Fabric and Fiber web presence. Now let's select the team drop-down box in the top right corner of the portal. Note the few teams listed. Now let's press Escape key to keep the current team selected. Now each team can have a different team favorites listed, different work capacity, and even different work items. The determining factor on where a work item will show up is governed by the area field. Now let's navigate to the backlog by selecting the View Backlog link under the Activities section. The product backlog contains work items that haven't been assigned and committed to an iteration. These product backlog items represent user stories that will eventually be broken down into smaller tasks for the team to take on. Please note that the current iteration shown in the tree on the left side of this screen is Sprint 3. Team Foundation Server uses the current date and time to determine the current iteration. The virtual machine you are using has been hard-coded to use the date of May 16, 2012 for purposes of this lab. This date is set each time you boot up this virtual machine. If your virtual machine has been running for a while, it may no longer be set to May 16, 2012. If so, you should manually set the date on your virtual machine to 10 a.m. on May 16, 2012. However, if you have modified work items or source control in Team Foundation Server prior to starting this hands-on lab, it's recommended that you restore this virtual machine to its original state prior to completing this lab. Let's imagine that the VP of Fabric and Fiber has requested that a new user story be implemented for the customer-facing service portal. This new user story will enable customers to see weather-related service outages. In the Contents section for the product backlog, let's select the last row and then create a new product backlog item with this title: Customer should see weather-related outages on portal. Please note that the new work items are generally inserted above the selected location. The exception is that if you selected the last work item, the insertion will be after the selected location. Having that said, let's select the Add button to add the new user story to the backlog. Work items on the product backlog are ordered based on priority, with high priority items at the top. Our new work item has a high priority, so move it to the top of the list by dragging and dropping it into place. Let's edit the new user story to assign it to the appropriate product owner and record an initial estimate of expected effort. Let's double-click on the new user story. Let's assign the new item to Brian Keller. Now set the state to approved. Now set initial effort of 8. Now let's select the Save and Close button. Please note that each team may choose to define the effort value as they see fit, using a unit of story points, hours, days, or number of sodas required. The point here is that this measure is a relative value with respect to other work items. Work will be broken down into hours later. A popular planning approach that helps to eliminate groupthink and consider input from all team members is known as planning poker. You can read more about this from this link. Now let's assign the new user story to the current iteration Sprint 3 by dragging and dropping it. If you are a Scrum purist, you're probably cringing at the fact that we just added a new work to a mid-flight iteration. While this is something you might never do in real world, this is a shortcut taken for the purpose of this lab in order to simplify the workflow and still show you all the aspects of the new project management interface. Well, that and the VB told you to. Please note the iteration path for the new user story to make sure that it's assigned to Sprint 3 as expected. This user story will remain on the product backlog until the team commits to taking it on. The product backlog view also provides a velocity chart that shows the amount of work that the team has undertaken in each sprint, with the current sprint breaking that down further to differentiate between work in progress and work completed. Let's click on the mini chart in the upper right corner to load the large view. During Sprint 1, the team completed 35 story points worth of efforts. Sprint 2 was slightly more productive with 42 story points completed. The current iteration represented by Sprint 3 shows that we have completed 18 story points so far, with 23 remaining. Remember that these story points are a relative measure of efforts that was agreed upon by the team. Now let's press the escape key to close the velocity chart. The product backlog also includes a simple forecasting tool that you can turn on to get a rough idea of what can be accomplished in future iteration. Let's select the forecast link to turn it on. Note that the forecasting is currently being calculated with a velocity of 10, meaning that each future iteration will take on about 10 story points worth of effort. As you can see, Sprint 4 is actually forecasted to include 11 story points. Please remember that the backlog items that don't have effort assigned are assumed to be 0. That's why it's really recommended that this value is set before using the forecast tool. The user story that we just added and assigned to Sprint 3 is the top backlog item listed, and it's not part of Sprint 4. Even though it may initially look like that, Sprint 4 has a line under it and includes rows 2 and 3. As we saw from the velocity chart, that may not be aggressive enough for this all-star team. So let's click on the 10 value to change it to 35 and then press enter. Now that we have the forecasting velocity set to a more realistic value, we can get an idea what the team can accomplish over the remaining iterations. The product backlog view also groups the past, current, and future iteration by their assigned dates. So let's select Sprint 3 link so that we can break down work and assign it to the appropriate team members. In the backlog for Sprint 3, collapse the two user stories that have a state of done by clicking on the small triangles just to the left of associated titles. Before we break down the user story, let's take a quick tour of this iteration backlog view. To start with, it shows all user stories and associated tasks that are assigned to the selected iteration regardless of state. At a glance, you can see that the current iterations runs from May 7 to 18, with 3 work days remaining. Just to the right of the current iteration date range, there is a small graph showing the burn down of the remaining work. Let's click on the burn down graph to view it. The graph shows remaining work over the course of the sprint. The actual trend line makes it look like the team may not be able to finish the assigned work in time. But keep in mind that we still expect some work to be completed before the end of the current day. Let's press escape to close the burn down graph. Now locate the overall work bar that shows how close to capacity we are for the current iteration, based on the total of the remaining work for the tasks in this iteration and based on the total capacity for the team. It looks like we are okay for now, but we still haven't broken the new user story into tasks for the team yet. Let's select the capacity tab to look at the team capacity details. The capacity view allows us to specify the number of hours per day that each team member will be working on this project, as well as days off per team member, and overall team days off. These capacity settings apply to the current iteration. You can optionally use the activity column to describe the disciplines that each team member specializes in. When tasks are broken down by activity as well, it can provide you with another view across your team capacity to determine if, for example, you have enough people working on documentation to meet the demands for this iteration. For now, let's leave the capacity setting unmodified. Now let's return to the content view of the current product backlog. Imagine that we are meeting as a team to commit to the new user story and break it up into tasks. Let's double-click on the new work item. Now let's change the state from approved to committed. And then let's select Save and Close button. Once the team commits to the work, it will disappear from the product backlog. Select the button with the plus symbol in it to the left of the new user story to add a new task. This will become a child task of the user story and will be used to help describe the implementation details required to complete this user story. For the new task, let's enter consume OData feed for weather alerts. Now let's assign it to Cameron Skinner. And set the remaining work to 5 hours. Now click Save and Close button. Select the button with the plus symbol in it to the left of the new user story to add another task. Now for the new task, enter Create UI for Alerts as a title. Now let's assign it to Annie Harriman and set the remaining work to 3 hours. Now click Save and Close button. Note that the new tasks were added as the children of the user story and that some of the work effort bar graphs have now turned red, indicating that we have too much work assigned to the team based on capacity. Cameron is especially overworked as indicated by his individual capacity graph. Let's scroll down to the last user story. It looks like the last user story in this sprint is a sizable one, and it hasn't been started yet. So this could be a good candidate to reschedule for a future iteration so that the team can get back on track given their additional workload. Let's drag and drop this last user story with the title Technician can edit customer contact detail on Windows Phone into the Sprint 4 iteration on the left-hand side of the window. Take another look at the overall work bar once again to make sure it's now green. This means that we are well within the current team capacity. Just don't tell the VP or he might find another high priority request for us to work on. That was the end of exercise 1. Let's get started on exercise 2. Exercise 2, Task Board. In this exercise, you will learn how to use the task board to view status of work for the current iteration and move tasks between states. Task boards are a great tool for determining at a glance what work needs to be finished before the end of an iteration. Now that we have finished breaking down the work and assigning it to team members, let's take a look at the task board that will be used in the next stand-up team meeting to report and record progress. Select the board tab from the top of the Fabric and Fiber Web Team default page. By default, the task board shows all tasks for the current iteration grouped by product backlog item and by the current state. Let's drag and drop the Consume OData feed for weather alerts task to the In Progress columns. Oops. Let's click cancel. Now drag and drop. By the way, the task board is touch enabled as well. This will not work within this virtual machine, but you might want to put in your request now for that nice wall-mounted touchscreen monitor you have been wanting for your team. Now let's single-click on the 5 values showing on the Consume OData feed for weather alert task and change the remaining work to 1, just to simulate Cameron working on the task for 4 hours during the day. Now let's drag and drop the Create UI for Alerts task to the In Progress column. And let's change remaining work field to 1. The 2 new high priority tasks are now in progress with an estimated 2 hours of work left to go. Let's collapse the user story for which the tasks are all done by clicking on the small triangle just to the left of the associated titles. Now let's drag and drop the task for Julia titled Review New Feature with Technical Early Adapters to the Done column to record that work as completed. Note that the remaining work was automatically reduced to 0 when you did this. Also note that the burn down chart in the top right corner has updated immediately after we made this change. Let's click on the burn down chart. Note that there is less than 20 hours of efforts left to go in order to complete the work for the iteration. Now let's close the burn down chart. Note that each row representing a work item shows a roll-up of hours remaining, which is the sum of remaining work for all child tasks. In addition to that, each column representing a status has a roll-up of remaining work, giving you a good idea how much work the team is actively working on right now. The task board also has a team member pivot. Select the team members link near the top of the task board view. This view makes it easy to see what team members are currently working on and how much effort remains for each for the remainder of the current iteration. And that was the end of exercise 2 and the end of the lab. This video was brought to you by MIA LM community. Thank you.